Every year, people work harder. Every year, they become more exhausted. And every year, somehow, they end up with less. Rent exploded. Groceries exploded. Healthcare exploded. Student debt exploded. And yet, corporate profits reached record highs. Billionaire wealth grew by 1.3 trillion in a single year. The stock market celebrated. The financial press applauded, while 60% of Americans reported living paycheck to paycheck. At some point, if you're paying attention, you have to ask a question, a terrifying question. Not, why is the system failing? But, what if it isn't? What if rent is this high because it's supposed to be? What if debt is this inescapable because it was designed to be? What if exhaustion is this universal because a tired population is a compliant one? What if the system isn't broken at all? What if it's working exactly as intended, just not for you? What you're about to watch is not a conspiracy theory. It is a documented, numbered, sourced examination of how modern economic life was engineered, structure by structure, law by law, incentive by incentive, to produce exactly the world you are living in right now. And once you see the architecture, you cannot unsee it. Let's start with what you were told. From the moment you were old enough to understand language, the promise was delivered. By parents, by schools, by politicians, by advertising, by culture itself. Work hard, stay out of trouble, get an education, play by the rules, and in return, a house, a family, a retirement, a life that gets better over time. The promise was not subtle. It was the central operating mythology of modern American life, the foundational contract between society and the individual, and for a brief window, roughly from 1945 to 1975, it was largely true. A working-class man with a high school diploma could buy a house, support a family, and retire with a pension. A woman entering the workforce could expect that her additional income would create real upward mobility for her family. A college graduate could expect that their degree would generate returns that justified its cost several times over. The promise was real enough, for enough people, for long enough that it became unquestionable. It became culture. It became identity. It became the story America told about itself to the world and to its own citizens. And that, the depth of belief in the promise, is precisely what made what came next so effective. Because when the system is changed, gradually enough, slowly enough, that no single generation can feel the shift in their own lifetime, the promise can be kept in language while being dismantled in practice. The words stay the same. The math changes completely, and the most important consequence of dismantling a promise that people still believe in, when it fails to deliver, they blame themselves. The trap was built in layers, each layer designed to look like opportunity. The first layer, housing. In the 1970s, housing policy in America began a quiet structural shift. The government withdrew from direct public housing investment. Zoning laws in desirable areas were written and defended to restrict supply. Institutional capital was gradually permitted, then encouraged, to enter the residential market. By 2024, the result, a median home costs more than 7 times the median annual income. In many major cities, 12 to 15 times. Institutional investors own 3 million single-family homes that would otherwise be available to first-time buyers. The trap's design is elegant. Make the primary wealth-building asset of the middle class, home ownership, inaccessible without debt. Then make the debt permanent through interest structures that ensure the first decade of payments is almost entirely interest, not principal. You don't buy a house. You rent it from a bank for 30 years. And if everything goes perfectly, you own it when you're in your 60s. The second layer, education. In 1978, student loans became non-dischargeable in bankruptcy. This single legislative change, made quietly, with minimal public debate, transformed education from a social investment into a debt product. Without the bankruptcy protection that every other form of debt enjoys, lenders had no incentive to price loans responsibly. Universities had no incentive to control costs. The student had no protection. The result? $1,077 trillion in student debt. 45 million people. Average age of a student loan borrower, 40. The third layer, healthcare. The United States spends 18% of GDP on healthcare, more than any country in the world, while achieving outcomes ranked 37th globally. The gap between cost and outcome is not inefficiency, it is extraction. Every dollar of unnecessary administrative complexity, every denied claim, every billing code dispute is revenue for someone. A health crisis in America is simultaneously a medical event and a financial catastrophe. This is not an accident. It is a feature. 3 layers: housing, education, healthcare. 3. Things every human being requires to function, all 3 structured to generate debt that is difficult or impossible to escape. The trap is not a single mechanism. It is an ecosystem. Let's talk about debt, not as a moral failure, as a business model. In 2024, total American consumer debt, not including mortgages, exceeded $17.5 trillion. That number funds an enormous industry. The debt collection industry alone generates $15 billion per year. The credit card industry generates $176 billion in interest and fees annually. Student loan services earn billions in fees for managing debt they didn't lend and cannot modify. Debt is not a side effect of the financial system. It is the financial system's primary product. Here is the mechanism. When wages are insufficient to cover the cost of life, which they have been for the bottom 60% of American workers since roughly 1980, debt fills the gap. It maintains the appearance of purchasing power. It allows consumption to continue. It keeps the economy functioning, but at a cost that compounds. The credit card is the clearest example. The average APR, 22.8%, on a $6,500 balance. The American average, minimum payments will take 18 years to pay off, at a total cost of approximately $17,000, for $6,500 in original spending. This is not a side effect of poor financial decisions. It is the designed output of a minimum payment structure that was specifically calculated to maximize the repayment period and therefore the interest extracted. The payday loan industry is the most naked version. 400% APR, legal in 35 states. The typical payday borrower rolls over their loan 8 times before paying it off. A $300 loan becomes $1,200 before it's closed. This industry does not exist by accident in low-income communities. It was placed there because it requires financial desperation to function. Without desperate people, there is no market, and the student loan system is the most architecturally sophisticated. It captured the most idealistic transaction in a society, a young person investing in their own future, and turned it into a multi-decade revenue stream by removing every protection that would make that revenue stream risky. No bankruptcy discharge, no ability to refinance with federal lenders, no statute of limitations in most states, wage garnishment, Social Security garnishment. The student debt system has more collection tools than the IRS. Debt is not a problem to be solved. It is a product to be managed. And the management, for the institutions managing it, is extraordinarily profitable. Let us document precisely what it costs to exist in America in 2025. Not to live well, not to build wealth, not to travel or enjoy luxuries, to exist, shelter, food, healthcare, transportation, utilities, these 5 categories. Average rent for a 1-bedroom apartment, $1,187 per month, $23,144 per year. Average grocery cost for a single adult, $4,800 per year. Average health insurance premium employer-sponsored family plan, $22,000 per year. Average transportation cost, car payment, insurance, fuel, maintenance, $12,000 per year. Average utilities, electric, gas, water, internet, $4,200 per year. Total cost of existing one person, approximately $67,000. Per year, the median individual income in America, $40,140. The gap between what it costs to exist and what the median person earns is $26,160 per year, before taxes, before student loans, before childcare, before anything that makes life more than existence. For a family of 4, 2 adults, 2 children, the cost of existing exceeds $100,000 per year in most American cities. The median household income, $74,180. The math does not work. It cannot work. And it has not worked for the bottom half of American earners for decades. This is the fundamental violence of modern American economic life. Not a dramatic event, not a single crisis. Just the steady, monthly, inescapable arithmetic of a life that costs more than it pays. And because this violence is invisible, because it manifests as credit card balances and missed savings goals and delayed retirements, rather than as physical events, it is also largely silent. Nobody holds a press conference about the month you couldn't save anything. Nobody reports on the 3 a.m. you spent calculating whether the car repair was possible. The violence is private, and private violence is the easiest kind to ignore. A population under this kind of sustained financial pressure is potentially dangerous. Not dangerous in the sense of violence, dangerous in the sense of organization. Population that accurately identifies the structural source of its suffering and identifies it collectively is a population capable of demanding structural change. The distraction economy exists, in significant part, to prevent that identification, not through censorship, not through force, through something far more elegant and far more effective, infinite, optimized, personally targeted alternatives to political consciousness. The average American spends 7 hours and 4 minutes per day consuming digital media. In a 16-hour waking day, that is 44% of all available time, fed into algorithmically managed attention environments whose single optimization target is continued engagement, not information, not well-being, not political awareness, engagement, time in system. The tools of engagement are well documented. Variable reward schedules, the same psychological mechanism as gambling. Social comparison triggers, outrage amplification, because anger generates 70% more engagement than neutral content. Tribal identity reinforcement. The result is a population that is deeply engaged and systematically directed away from the specific engagement that would threaten the system generating the engagement. The algorithm does not suppress information about wage stagnation. It simply ensures that content about celebrity conflict, political tribal warfare, and personal aspiration outperforms it by orders of magnitude. Suppression is inefficient. Outcompeting is elegant. Meanwhile, the political division generated by outrage media serves a specific economic function. A country divided along cultural and tribal lines cannot form the cross-tribal economic coalitions that Heisty